The Syrian rebel offensive, which began in late November, has taken control of 6 military airfields and 1 civilian airport: civilian Aleppo International Airport, Taftanaz Military Airport, Hama Military Airport, Kherson Military Airport, Nirab Military Airport, Menag Military Airport, Abdul al-Duhur Airport. The Voice of Turkey Telegram channel notes that the opposition may soon establish control over the Jira military airfield as well. The rebels are currently creating advancing columns near Hama to advance towards the city of Homs. A column of opposition forces on the Hama-Homs road is preparing to launch an offensive towards Homs city. The process may prove to be much faster than expected, observers wrote. On Thursday evening, it is also reported that Salamiyah, the second largest city in Hama province, has been taken over by the opposition. Meanwhile, the opponents of the regime of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad are being released from prison in Hama, just as in Aleppo earlier. In turn, in Aleppo, former soldiers of the Assad regime, police and other security forces are registering with Syrian Salvation Government in order to receive amnesty and be accepted to serve the new authorities. Recall, insurgents led by the Islamist faction Hayat Tahrir al-Sham are advancing on the central Syrian city of Homs. The UK-based war monitor, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, said. The observatory said the insurgents were now just 5 kilometers from the outskirts of the key city, which provides a link between the capital, Damascus, and the north. The southward march of the rebels comes after they captured the northern city of Aleppo and Hama in the center in what have been devastating blows to the power of autocratic President Bashar Assad. Homs residents have been leaving their homes in their thousands and fleeing to western coastal regions that are under full control by the government, the observatory said. A Syrian army officer told Reuters that reinforcements were arriving to help government forces consolidate positions around the city. He also said that Russian forces had also bombed the Rustan bridge along the key M5 highway overnight in a bid to stop the rebels using what is a main route to Homs. But the observatory said the rebels had reached an area very near the city despite efforts to hold them back.
الله أكبر. تم تحرير كتيبة تلحاص 599 في طلحاس هيك. نعم الله أكبر. انتبه هلا يكون المقامات الجمعات. الله أكبر. يا بشار أسد تحت أقدام أبطال فجر الحرية. الله أكبر. الحمد لله.
الحمد لله.
تم تحرير كتيبة تلحاصل وتلعرن.
وهذاك الرادار.
The Syrian army has withdrawn from the central city of Hama after insurgents broke through its defenses, the military said Thursday, in another setback for President Bashar Assad. The announcement came hours after opposition fighters said they had entered the city and were marching toward the center. In a video released on December 5, Abu Muhammad al-Golani, leader of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, said the revolutionaries began entering the city of Hama to desanitize up the wound that has been left in Syria for 40 years. On Thursday morning, Syrian insurgents said they entered Hama after 3 days of intense clashes with government forces on its outskirts, part of an ongoing offensive. The Syrian army said it redeployed from Hama and took positions outside the city to protect the lives of civilians. The capture of Hama, Syria's fourth largest city, is another blow for Assad days after insurgents captured much of the northern city of Aleppo, the country's largest city. Hama is one of the few cities that remained under full government control during Syria's conflict, which broke out in March 2011 following a popular uprising. Its capture would be a major setback for President Bashar Assad.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أبشركم إخواني أن إخوانكم المجاهدون الثوار قد بدأوا بالدخول إلى مدينة حماة لتطهير ذاك الجرح الذي استمر في سوريا لمدة 40 عاما. أسأل الله عز وجل أن يكون فتحا لا ثأر فيه، بل فتحا كله رحمة ومودة، والحمد لله رب العالمين.
If Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria falls to a rebel offensive, Russia will lose its only military base in the Mediterranean. This could have dramatic consequences for Russian efforts in Ukraine, writes The Telegraph's military commentator David Axe. He noted that the rebels had already captured the country's largest city, Aleppo, and were approaching the important city of Hama. If the anti-government forces were to capture Hama, they would have the prospect of advancing towards the Mediterranean coast, to the Latakia region, where the only Russian naval base on the Mediterranean Sea is located in the port city of Tartus. Moscow has used the base since the 1970s. In 2017, Russia and Syria signed a 49-year contract that gives Moscow even greater access to Tartus. It was from here that several Russian ships sailed into the Black Sea before the full-scale attack on Ukraine. As David Axe notes, without modern, reliable ships capable of withstanding long sea voyages, Russia is forced to rely on coastal sailing of its fleet from port to port. And the base in Tartus is important in this regard. The loss of Tartus would be catastrophic for Russian power projection in southern Europe and North Africa. Realistically, the only way for the Kremlin to replace the vital coastal infrastructure at Tartus is to restore access to the Mediterranean via the Bosphorus, closed to the Russian Navy because of the war in Ukraine, the Observer notes. According to Axe, having lost Tartus, the Kremlin may face a difficult choice: continue to fight in Ukraine and lose influence in the Mediterranean region, or make peace with Ukraine and unblock the Turkish Straits for its fleet. As reported, Syrian rebels have approached Hama, an important city on the Damascus-Aleppo highway. Hama was taken under government control at the very beginning of the civil war and has remained an important stronghold of the Assadites for the past 13 years. If the rebels capture it, this could put the Assad regime in an extremely difficult position. Meanwhile, more and more evidence is appearing online about the rich military trophies that the rebels have captured in less than a week of the offensive. In particular, several anti-aircraft systems and many tanks have fallen into the hands of the Islamists. During their retreat, Russian forces and the Bashar al-Assad regime abandoned a significant amount of military equipment which was later seized by the Syrian opposition. This includes not only T-90 tanks, but also SAMs and SMERSH MLRS systems. Defense Express notes that some social media users have suggested that Ukraine should negotiate with the Syrian opposition to acquire these trophies, particularly the rare Russian Podlet K1 radar. According to the Turkish monitoring site Clash Report, the Syrian opposition seized a Russian Podlet K1 radar from a base belonging to the 25th Special Forces Brigade of the Assad regime. The fact that it was captured in a folded position indicates that the Russians or their Syrian allies were likely preparing to evacuate it. As a result, they didn't have time to significantly damage the radar before leaving. Defense Express says that the Podlet K1 radar is designed to work with the S-400 and S-300 PMU-2 systems. The radar has the following specifications. It can detect targets at ranges between 10 and 200 kilometers with a maximum detection height of up to 10 kilometers. The station can track up to 200 targets simultaneously, and its deployment time is 20 minutes. By the summer of 2024, Russia had lost at least 3 Podlet K1 radars and 1 damaged during the full-scale war against Ukraine, according to Oryx estimates. According to Defense Express, this highlights the rarity of these radar stations being used in combat. Another key point is that the Ukrainian Defense Forces have never captured a complete Podlet K1 radar as a trophy. Public reports only mention that the remains of a destroyed Podlet K1 radar were found by Ukrainian forces in Chornobayivka during the liberation of the right bank Kherson region in November 2022, Defense Express adds. It also notes that turning back to the Syrian trophies, it's important to recognize the challenges involved. While the abandoned Russian and Assad regime equipment may seem like valuable prizes, retrieving any of it could be logistically difficult. Therefore, setting priorities is crucial, and the most valuable pieces should be targeted first. In this case, that would be the Podlet K1 radar. Securing this radar could provide valuable insights which would then help improve the effectiveness of missile strikes against Russian military targets. A large-scale military operation of opposition forces against government forces continues in Syria.